You're listening to I Love It When, and I'm your host, Mo. I'm a speaker, coach, and connector. You're in the right place if you're looking for some inspiration and you're ready to truly embrace who you are. My intention with this podcast is to help you see that you are so much more powerful than you realize. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of I Love It When. I'm doing a special pre-episode recording of this introduction because I wanted to share a little bit more about Seph before we launch into our conversation today. So, welcome back. My name is Margaret Smith. I go by Mo. And today I have Seph Dietlin, an angel communicator, on my podcast. And rather than just leave it at that, I wanted to share how I met Seph. I actually found him through someone that I follow on Instagram, Haley Hoffman Smith. She is a spiritual leader and somebody that I really admire and love watching her journey and her growth. And she shared about Seph when she went to Sedona, Arizona. And it's part of what sparked my interest in having a retreat there and also just reaching out and connecting with Seph. So I met him for the first time in person when I had my unscripted retreat in August of 2022. I had him come and speak at the retreat for about an hour and a half, and it was a phenomenal experience. And so I wanted to bring him on the podcast to share more about who Seph is and what exactly he does, because if you're not at all a part of the spiritual world, or if it's not your thing, and I say angel communicator, you might be like, Margaret, what the heck? What does that even mean? And I also wanted to share him on the podcast because it's integrating more and more of who I am. And so in a way, you're getting to know me and more about me through Seph as well. So I wanted to start out by sharing a bit more about my journey with religion, faith, and spirituality. So when I share this with people, I share that I grew up Catholic and really in a not a very legalistic, it was a very loving, unconditional love kind of upbringing. So when you hear about Catholicism a lot of people think really strict structure, very much it has to be black or white, this way or that. And my parents were not like that at all. So it was a very loving environment. I grew up Catholic. I went through my baptism, obviously, and then I got confirmed when I was in high school and really just began my journey of learning about what this all was then. I went to a Lutheran college, not because it was Lutheran, but because of the size, Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington. And then I always say I dated a Baptist, dated a Nazarene, and started to have experiences with people in different denominations of Christianity mostly. And so over the years, after I graduated college, I moved back up to the Seattle area and I started visiting a number of different Christian churches, different denominations all around the Seattle area. I would say over the course of probably 5 years, I must have visited a couple dozen different kinds of churches, trying to find the right community, trying to find what would help me feel at home. I thought I was looking for the right group of people. And also just, I'm big on feelings and on vibe and on energy. And when I entered the building, I can always tell, like, how do I feel? Do I feel good? Do I feel connected? Do I feel like this is a space that it's safe for me? And I just never felt that there was a building or a group or a church that really felt right, felt like me. And so the first time I got that feeling was actually when I was working with someone in the real estate world who shared with me that she read fairy cards and she did Reiki. And I said, oh my gosh, I've always had this interest in the back of my mind. Like, I wonder what it's like to meet with a psychic. I wonder what it's like to work with people who work with the unseen meaning the spirit world. Because even though it wasn't expressed to me growing up from my family or from the church explicitly, I felt like it was like, this is not okay to touch. This is evil. This is territory you don't want to step into. You're going to get hurt or you're going to hurt someone else. And so I always felt like, oh, I can't go there. But with my experience in the real estate world, I traveled to New Orleans for a conference one year, and I met with my first psychic, and I had a really beautiful experience. It felt very emotional, and it felt very much like I was talking to somebody who knew me. And then I met this woman who read fairy cards, and I started to really open up to the idea that, wow, something about this just resonates in my body. My body is responding to this, meaning, you know, that feeling that you have when you're with someone where you feel safe and you feel like you can truly be yourself and you want to it just feels like home. It feels like home. And that's when I really started to allow myself to explore my spiritual side and realized that this was something I'd been missing my whole life. And here I was in my early 30s just beginning to explore it. And so that's something that I've been doing since I was like 32. And so now I'm 41. So it's been 9 years. And really just now in the last couple of years, starting to speak out more and more about it, because I've realized if I don't share this part of myself, you guys are not knowing what's aiding in my journey. And as a coach and as a speaker and as a leader, I really believe in, first of all, my own privacy, yes, and privacy with my journey and what I'm going through, but also I believe in sharing and talking through things, because it's in the sharing that I've learned I also receive, and I learn more about myself and I learn more about humanity. So I wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention the importance of words and definitions of words and vocabulary. This is something else that I've really learned in my journey that I realized was really, really, really critical, because oftentimes I think we get stuck on words and that separates us. And we don't realize how much we actually have in common and how much unity there is. But we get stuck on verbiage that perhaps certain religions have used or built their followings off of. And so, as an example, growing up, the word denomination, I got stuck on that for a while because of the Catholic faith. Within the Christian faith as an umbrella, Catholics, the feedback that I got were that Catholics were not necessarily going to go to heaven because we didn't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And this is something that I heard from people who were part of a non-denominational Christian church. And so I kept getting this information back and I was like, well, this is strange. This doesn't sound like the God that I've learned about. That was my first kind of clue. Another example is from a guy that I dated in college. His parents, well, I think they thought I was a nice girl. They didn't truly like me because they wanted him to date someone who was of the same body of the church. And I remember thinking, body of the church, what does that mean? And when he said to me, that means they want me to date somebody who actually goes to the same church building that I go to. I thought to myself, why does this seem not right? This seems really strange. And so I started to pay attention to how people were separating themselves according to words and definitions. And that was another red flag to me, that like I hadn't gotten validation yet that this wasn't right, but something in me said this is not right. So I want to encourage you through listening to this episode with Seph to start to raise your awareness every day and pay attention to how your body feels. Begin to notice things about how your body feels in response to what people say. Ask yourself, take the time to stop and reflect in just little ways. It doesn't have to be anything really intense. You don't have to meditate in a corner for 45 minutes. But as you're going through your day, if you notice something about a response that maybe your body has to something that somebody says, ask yourself what that is. That's how you begin to raise your awareness to what's going on around you. And then the other thing that I wanted to just mention is that something else I've learned is that we all have much more in common than we realize. Like I've said, we cannot get stuck on what other humans have told us to do, believe, or think. Right? That's part of raising that awareness and realizing, how were you raised? What were you told to believe growing up? And how are you choosing to continue to follow that? Have you evaluated it? Have you reevaluated what you believe, what you think, and how you act, and changed anything? Because it's perfectly normal to want to change things as you grow and learn. Change is good. It's a good thing. And I think it's time that we fall back on our bodies and listen to our hearts, because this is what really wants to talk to us. Our hearts and our bodies are talking to us all the time. So please comment, like, and share this episode on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it and what you get out of this. And welcome to my journey. Welcome to exploring a part of my life that really has brought me immense joy and peace and so much love. Love, I think, is what has become a theme in my life when I feel like I'm at home. I'm really excited today to introduce you all to Seph Dietlin, an angel communicator. Some of you may have been following my social media and seen that I've shared some classes that he's had while up here in Everett, Washington and Seattle, Washington area. And part of me sharing Seph on this podcast is really fully integrating all of myself into what I'm doing in my work. And a big part of that is all about spirituality. And so I'm really excited to chat with Seph today and help you get to know him more, and also through him, me more. So thank you so much, Seph, for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start off by just having you share a little bit about who you are to begin with and what you do.
Thank you. No, I love that. So it evolves as we go along. And so what I have discovered that I am is a human potential activator.
Okay.
Now, I use various gifts to do that. And it started off by communicating with the angels, having an encounter with them, having 20 years of dialogue with them. And through that, have discovered how we are meant to live at our full potential, the way that we're designed to live, what we're designed to experience, and who we're designed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I use various methods. I'm a certified hypnotherapist. I am a trance channel, so I communicate with the angels. When I do work, people like to label it psychic work or intuitive work. So I work with them, and I'm an energy medium, which means I also transmit energy from the quantum realm with my connection with the angels, or I guess you could say that level of consciousness. If some people aren't really that comfortable with the angels, but they are citizens of the quantum realm. So if you're comfortable with that and spirit guides, that's fine too.
Okay. What were you doing before you started doing more with the angels?
So I was a real estate agent in Southern California, and I was having a blast. And I had an experience that was quite a bit of a setback in my personal life and business life all at once. And I had what some people could describe as maybe a nervous breakdown, or really kind of that dark moment of transformation. And in it, something inside compelled me to call on my angels. And I sort of, I guess you could say, I challenged them to make a more real and tangible experience.
Okay.
I literally told them that believing they're there, not being able to talk to them or ever see them, makes it really hard to actually believe that they're there. So I told them they needed to make themselves a little more tangibly present if they wanted me to believe that they were there, especially in sight of the fact that I told them they weren't doing a very good job, since I had like this huge setback, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I loved hearing your story when I first found you. So I found Seph through Instagram, actually, through someone that I follow, Haley Hoffman Smith. And when I first heard you speak, I think I found one of your videos on YouTube, and you shared a little bit about growing up and I think being bullied in high school. And so that is part of what I want to share too with my journey. And not so much, well, yes, being teased and bullied, that definitely did happen, but also for people who are not familiar at all with spirituality, or who may be a little hesitant, I want them to feel comfortable listening to this and being open to the idea that something else might exist. So I also want to share that growing up, I was raised Catholic. I went to a Lutheran college. I dated a Baptist. I dated a Nazarene. I went to a lot of different churches in search for a home, for something that felt finally like I was welcomed. It included all of me. It wasn't inclusive in community in general. And I never found that until someone that I was working with started out by sharing their fairy cards with me. She read fairy cards, and she read my fairy cards, and we started talking more. And I got this feeling like I was home, and I can't even describe it other than in my body. It felt good. It felt real. It felt like I recognized it. I recognized her, like her soul on a different level, and everything shifted for me after that. And so I know I have people that follow me and who listen to the podcast who may have no introduction at all to the idea that I believe in angels and that I love this part of my life now that I've found. And so I just really appreciate you coming on to share, because I think it's really important for people to know all of me. And I think that's a big part of also why I'm here. And, so I guess all for that, I felt called very much to share that part of my story, because when I heard you talk about it on a different podcast episode that I listened to, I thought it was really awesome how you described, I think it was your mom, who was very much in touch as well with the angels and was also Catholic, and that she felt like it was hard for her to bridge both worlds.
You bring up something really amazing, because for anyone who may struggle to accept or receive any of this, we don't realize how backward a lot of things are in the physicalized world.
Mm.
And it's by design, because that's the way as a soul we're meant to discover ourselves. And so what I describe how you identified with being on a conscious path, and I like to use the word consciousness, it is a bit more inviting because spirituality tends to conjure up like conflicting religious beliefs.
Okay.
But right. And with that word comes a whole nother level, because consciousness is our awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have levels of mind.
Okay.
And we know these levels of mind because whether we are religious or conscious, we're using them anyway. And it's to the level that we can use them that shifts when we become aware of those levels of mind. So I like to call our awareness our spiritual mind. So we're a soul that came into this body. And the logical construct, or the logical mind that we use for logical things,
Mm-hmm.
is a mind that we only have while we're in a human body, which is why it's so limiting. And that is the level where fear is. That's the level
Mm-hmm.
where limiting thinking is. That's the level that operates in full glory in this reality, which is why you have conflict and misunderstanding, because it's all done from that mind construct.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a higher mind, and we use it all the time. It can be as simple as being in the shower
Mm-hmm.
and being in a heightened brainwave state, giving us access to our higher mind. And voila, a great idea comes to us. We act on it. And it's like, wow, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Well, when you begin to connect with the quantum realm through the fairies or the angels, and that's what they're there for.
Mm-hmm.
All these religions like Catholicism tells us we have angels, and then tells us we can't talk to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or we're crazy if we talk to them.
Yeah.
And be careful when you're in the divine realm, because there might be evil beings lurking around.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, what's interesting is, when you talk about being bullied, I was bullied in Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't seem very aligned with the unconditional love of the Creator. And I knew that when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I abandoned religion when I in my teenage and early 20s, and I came back into alignment with what some people would call God, Creator, the quantum realm, the field of intelligence, through the angels. And it does feel a lot more aligned, and it does feel a lot more authentic. And we recognize love when we're in its presence. And if the Creator or the grand designer, the great Creator, is love, we know what it is because we feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go to a place where we feel fear or limitation and that sort of thing, then we know that we're not in the presence of the great Creator.
Mm-hmm. I love going back to the feeling piece of it, because I think that's also something that people can recognize, feeling constricted or restricted versus expansive and loving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the angels ask us to use our feelings like the same way that we use our fuel gauge in our car. We know if we are full or empty with fuel, and we know whether we're aligned or not by the way that we feel.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do feel constricted, if we do feel intensity, if we do feel in our mind or in fear and lack and limitation, then we are not aligned with our true and authentic and most expansive self.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is that we're exploring that true and expansive self. And though learning about how to activate people into their expansive nature comes via tutelage from the angels, it's not going to come from this realm.
Mm-hmm.
There's no construct or false construct in this reality that is interested in teaching us how to connect with our power, because all of those constructs have their own power agenda. And this isn't an us versus them or a conspiracy theory kind of thing. They're designed to try to trigger us into believing that we don't have power so that we can discover it here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have all of this alignment. And what's interesting is that on my way here, I was getting all kinds of words in signs, as a reminder that our reality and us are in unity with each other. And so that's what our guides are there for, is to call us back to our authentic nature so that we can continue to take the expansive journey that we're meant to.
Mm-hmm. What was it like switching from, gosh, real estate, and then I know you were in film as well. Switching from those worlds to something like this, did you find people around you kind of questioning, like, Seph, what's going on? What are you doing?
It's funny because having been bullied as a kid, I really learned at an early age to be very detached to what people think about me.
Mm-hmm.
So that did give me a lot less restriction and a lot more freedom to, let's say, move about the cabin. And all of this was via guidance and experiences. And when I share that, I also want to share how important that is for those that are listening, especially because they might find themselves on these zigzag type journeys and like
Mm-hmm.
wonder, what am I doing here? What am I doing here?
Yeah.
And how did that sudden shift and what was that all about, right?
Yeah.
So while I was in real estate, and I established a very clear communication link with the angels that was tried and true and proven. They would tell me things that would come true. They would guide me to things that would become manifest or realized. And they started teaching me amazing things like revealing unity, how we're all one being but in a separate body, things like that, very advanced concepts. They started revealing that through what I call our spiritual memory, because we know this already or resonate with it. And so after that period of time, I realized that I had a very special gift, and I asked them, how do you want me to serve? And they said, you're going to lose everything that you have to do what you're supposed to do with this. Are you willing to do that? And I said, sure. So the real estate crisis that we refer to from started in 2006 in Orange County, California, where I'm from. And I lost my house, and I did bankruptcy and foreclosure and all that kind of stuff. And then one day, or somewhere in the middle of this, the angels revealed to me in a dream, they showed me a vision of me actually empowering other people who were like me, as if I was organizing people and actually empowering them to put their message in the world, because it was time for humanity to hear the message. And of course, the angels had already told me back then that we would have this massive shift that they call the ascension. And they said, to continue on this journey in another direction. And of course, losing material wealth is part of actually the death of the ego, the death of the old, and letting go of the old limiting self and embracing a new way of following this guidance. And at one point, they said to me early in the morning, go to film school. Because I moved to Los Angeles from Orange County, which is just like 40 miles away. And I lived in West Hollywood, and they said, just go to film school. So I signed up for film school. People started casting me in their projects. I got IMDb, I SAG, an agent. And I thought, wow, maybe this is how I'm going to bring the angels to light, is just work in this field. And then with that influence, I would have the opportunity to sort of open people's eyes. But that quickly shifted. But what I did do was learn the craft of filmmaking, which I'm meant to use to create, let's say, documentaries or other ways of, because film is a very powerful medium, and to be able to utilize it as well as other ways of activating people. So it all kind of comes full circle, but in a more expansive way. So that experience was about getting to know the craft of filmmaking, and every piece of the puzzle fits into place. It doesn't become apparent or relevant sometimes until later. So for those listeners who are on a part of their journey where they can't figure out where the pieces fall into place, trust me, it's going to come together.
Yeah. No, thank you for saying that, because I've definitely experienced that myself, and it's what I remind people all the time. Give it time, make note of it, because I think before I would always see things that I knew were signs, even before I really was communicating with the angels myself and listening to their guidance. But other people would tell me, oh, that's just coincidence that happened. Oh, that's just, and I'm like, no, this has happened too many times. And so once you start to like write them down and track them, it's amazing. And then follow them. It makes life so much more flowy, so much easier. Yeah.
And you bring up an interesting topic, because you can either embrace miracles and see them everywhere.
Yeah.
Or you can let that logical part of your mind, the lower levels of your awareness, intelligence, you can let that hijack you and
Mm-hmm.
prevent you from experiencing the miracles.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that they're available to us. And so are our guides from the quantum realm. They're available to us.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't make themselves available to us if we block them out or if we block out the signs.
Mm-hmm.
And just because someone chooses to live in a very logical construct doesn't mean that beyond the limitations of their logic isn't something more
Mm-hmm.
that's already there.
Yeah.
And for a lot of conscious people, they feel very isolated. And this can speak to the audience as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because what will happen is they'll start to accelerate in what they see a lot differently. They'll see all kinds of things a lot differently, and they'll start to see what this world is made of. And sometimes that's referred to as the path less traveled.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the nucleus of any religion, the spirituality that's embedded in it,
Mm-hmm.
it does refer to some sort of revelation that we are more than what we believe we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be incredibly isolating when those around you want to sort of put you back in a logical construct or want to
Mm-hmm.
confine you back in that.
Mm-hmm.
And something innate in you is asking you to discover that more that
Mm-hmm.
exists outside the perimeter.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that the conscious community is getting larger and larger, which is the shift that the angels referred to 20 years ago. And that is just simply that we would become a higher version of ourselves that's a true reflection of who we're designed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the world will look completely different
Mm-hmm.
as every being on this planet begins to somehow or another fall into their own higher conscious states.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the very limiting, finite structures that we accept as solid and real are crashing and crumbling as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
And they will not be able to stand in the presence of this new higher and infinite paradigm. And we're all just going to sort of switch directions when we realize who we truly are and what we're truly capable of. And it'll be a whole different place here.
Mm-hmm. I love that. For people that are listening that are maybe just beginning to listen to that inner voice or to what might be angels or guides for them, how would you describe what you hear, see, feel? How do you get messages from the angels?
Well, first of all, we can see them in our outward reality. When in the minute that we connect with that, that's sort of the first level that it happens. Mm. So when someone says to me something like, I started seeing the numbers, 1111, 444, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the only reason that we know them is because we're starting to resonate with them. Mm-hmm. And we see them and they catch us. It's not the number itself in our physical reality that is the part of that that's the miracle. It's the part of our awareness that knows that it's connected to something bigger that is connected to us and that it means something. Mm-hmm. And when it means something, there's all kinds of ways. And it can start off with like 333 and 444, and then you'll start to see the most interesting things, like a personalized license plate that someone can have, and you see the words and it's exactly what you need. On the way to this studio to have this conversation, I saw a truck that was, looks like an office supply truck, and it said interdimensional communication. And I'm like, where do you ever see that? Except I happen to be right there, right? Yeah. And then it goes to higher levels where you just receive a knowing download. And we're already accustomed to those, but we can increase the frequency by listening for them or actually tuning in or tapping into that listening skill. Mm-hmm. And that's where the ability to activate people comes in. So for 15 of the last 20 years, I've been teaching people intuitive development, but you don't teach people that in the way you teach them algebra. Mm-hmm. It's an entrainment. It's an energy. Being in the presence of other energized people will energize you as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then what you do is you activate that subtle listening that will begin to hear things. And it's funny because I can feel now the energy going between my hands as I talk about this. Mm-hmm. It's like our ears get opened up, and now we have a super listening. Mm-hmm. And they'll speak to us, or that realm, our angelic realm, that quantum realm of consciousness, will find its way to speak to us and to know that it can reach us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting for me. I started getting these complete thoughts that I knew what it was telling me and could interpret it right away. And when you get to that level, you can't explain how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time, for example, my I got home from an open house and I heard the angels told me to drive to Disneyland. And I got to Harbor Boulevard and there was a woman stranded with her 2 little boys, no cell phone. And there's no way that you could get out of that situation without getting help from someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pulled over, we called a tow truck for her and did all that kind of stuff. But when I got off the freeway, I knew why I heard that message and why I was meant to drive for 20 minutes and assist this person. Now, the funny thing is that afterward, she took one of my business cards out of my car and she called me on my office voicemail and she said, thank you. And she also said, by the way, I stopped believing in angels until you stopped to help me.
Oh, wow.
So it was a little validation for me because it was kind of at the beginning of understanding what I was hearing inside. Mm-hmm. So from then on, anytime I got some weird idea that seemed like some form of guidance to go do something, I would go do it. And every time I would do it, something miraculous would happen. So it would open up more and more. Yeah. So it kind of goes in layers and levels until, I don't want to say you can't shut it off, but you're delightfully tuned into it constantly.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me very much of, I just interviewed, it's not actually published yet, but Kate Shepard, who has a podcast called The Creative Genius. And we talked about just that. She said it was almost scary how when she started to tap into it, they happened so frequently. Like things happened. She almost was like, this seems like too much, because it was incredible. So I think that the speed of which it happens can be shocking, especially if you're present and pay attention to it. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I became aware of through this process is that it's actually not whether or not it's being sent to us. It's when we raise our awareness to it, because everyone is being communicated with all the time by the divine.
Yeah.
And some people might say, oh, it's Allah's voice or it's God's voice or whatever. It's the same quantum level of consciousness, right? And what's interesting is that when you tune it in and turn it on, or actually increase your listening or your ability to receive it, it's already being sent constantly. And so it's going to seem like it increased in its frequency, but it didn't. What happened is that we raised our ability to be able to receive it.
Yeah. I love that. Can you talk a little bit about these activations that we've been doing while you were in Everett and now we're going to Federal Way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So first of all, what I'm guided to do is that when I bring people into the field, and I understand the field a lot more thanks to the guidance from the angels, and when we go into like meditation or mindfulness, and then we expand and expand and expand, I enter into the field with people, and I do that when I do my one-on-one work, whether it's virtual or whether I'm teaching classes. I enter into the field, and I had finally realized what I do. I enter into the field, the quantum field, the divine field, with the other person, and I turn the work over to the field of intelligence because it has its own intelligence. Which is why you'll never hear a quantum healer or a very powerful healer ever say, I healed you.
Yeah. If they said that, I would run the other way.
I would too.
Yes.
Yes. But what happens is that it's like I get called to play.
Yeah.
And because I can hear them, I know what to do. And everyone's session and every group session is different because it's exactly what everyone needs. And as we evolve, so too does the need when I get there. So all I do is I jump into the field. I bring like either the individual or the audience into the field. And that is a very expansive field. And to describe it to the listeners, sometimes if you get into a great conversation, what I mean by that is, especially when we start to become more aware, we become more aware of like a more expansive conversation, which is talking about amazing things that have positivity. And then you can end up getting hooked into conversations that are like, let's say, gossip or chronic complaining or whatever, and we can all go there, but it's low frequency and it disconnects us from the awareness to the field. So what happens is that by being constantly or continually aware, we know that, for example, when we have these very positive conversations, we get what I call consciously drunk or consciously high, where we feel so expanded and enjoy inside and centered and one. So when we do that, then I get guided to help move people through clearing things, but it's still a relationship with them and the quantum field. And I just get to play and watch and be the observer. And I'm like, sometimes I see these things occur when I do these sessions, one-on-one sessions with people. And I'm like literally my jaw is open. I'm like, thank you for giving me the opportunity to play with you. But it's not me, it's just an understanding that I've been able to shape thanks to having 20 years of dialogue with the angels, but I always give it back to them.
Yeah, the recognition, that piece, I think that I've had to learn about how you're a vessel, you're a channel for them, and not letting your ego get in the way. I've also recognized why I've had certain experiences in order to make sure that I'm aware of that, because you run into people in any industry, in any part of the world or humanity, where people let their ego run the show, and it just is it's not the same pure experience.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, because you mentioned the bullying earlier, and a lot of times when I do the work as well, and we enter into the field, and let's say we're clearing something from the past that's lower frequency or lower vibration, I did some work around the bullying. And I discovered that as a soul, I signed up for that experience because it would increase the humility that I would have in this lifetime and in this body, that would give me more access to the power, because you do need a little bit of humility and surrender. And the ego is such an interference because it's left brain, it's logical construct. And because it has such an interference quality, to be able to jump into the field with people, play with the angels, play with them, play with the quantum field, watch amazing things happen. And, just for clarity's sake, this is not just for the paranormal aspect. This is your everyday. When they came to me, I said, this has to have an everyday tangible quality. And they're like, trust us, it does.
Yeah.
And they've guided me to certain jobs that I needed. Recently they reminded me that I had forgot my passport somewhere so that I could get it FedExed in time to go on an international trip. So it's a very practical, tangible relationship that meets us in the world that we, quote unquote, live in or are experiencing right now in our human avatar. But because it has that aspect to it, I am just amazed sometimes when I go into the field and then I see things happen, and then afterward I hear about the miraculous things that happen to people. And it's like, it's not me. I mean, you can come back for more. I'll facilitate some more, but it's you and the quantum field. It's just that I happen to have a way of knowing how to get the two of you together.
So in these activations that you're doing, I've been sharing with people that you start off by channeling either a general message from the angels to the group that's with us, and then you channel for each person that's there a message, and then lead us through a meditation. How did you figure out like that was part of what you're supposed to do?
It's what falls into place.
Okay,
it's very interesting. And this is what I would say, to those that are really finding themselves in the conscious space or being led by consciousness. You're going to notice that you go to do things the old way or a way that's prescribed in a logical way, it might not work. And then all of a sudden, some activity or something that you do is just going to open up. It's going to show you the way. And every piece of it is something that happened when I got out of the way, and sometimes of an experience that I didn't understand, maybe
Yeah.
even didn't want.
Yeah.
And I remember going recently to a space to do some work, and I thought initially they had misunderstood what I did because they gave me what I thought was the wrong equipment, which was a massage table instead of a chair to do my work.
Oh.
So I just, sometimes I hear the angels say, go with it and peace be with you. And so I put people on the table, and they got into like a more relaxed state when I was doing hypnotherapy. And then I started like connecting them with the energy with my hands, and then embodying all of it at once, listening to them, giving them the messages, interacting with people in kind of this one-on-one session.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, interesting. Sometimes when people do this work remote with me, they'll put their phone, while I'm on Zoom, and they'll lay on a bed or a yoga mat or whatever, and we can make it work wherever they are. But the weird thing about the quantum field is that it doesn't matter if the person is in London or Sydney, and I'm in LA or Sedona or here in Washington State. I can just jump into the field of infinite possibility and just play.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
I love how, like you've described a couple times now, because I think people can really relate to this. There's been times in my work where I don't know why, but I just feel like I'm supposed to do it this way or do something. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go with it. It doesn't make any sense, but it just feels right. And going with that feeling more and more than with my logical brain, which has really just been instructed by years of school and years of systems that were set up by people that may not have had the purest of intentions or just have been doing things like this for years. So it's a different kind of feeling and flow to get into, but it's so much more fun. It's like very playful, like you said. Yeah.
It is. And, the angels have revealed, some mind-blowing details about who we are actually designed to be and the power that we have to consciously create our reality. And I'm talking like the ability to create a vehicle with our mind. And we're going to get to that place. And perhaps our journey starts off with manifesting the resources that we need for a business, manifesting success, manifesting a family that we want to create, or manifesting something that looks like it comes together in a little bit more of a linear way. But that's like an airplane that's taking off and it's still on the ground.
Yeah.
And then eventually, all of a sudden, you can feel yourself lift off the ground and start to do more and more miraculous things.
Yeah.
And we're meant to actually go all the way with this. And the reason that our reality was created by us, by the way, while we were still in the quantum realm, according to the angels, the reason that we created it to be so backward and so disempowering is so that we could discover our power. So this removes the us versus them conversation and a sort of a motive, even if you want to call it evil or whatever, it's still sort of programmed, or let's say allowed, into this dimension because it's a teaching tool. And that's where love comes in, because love is the energy of the quantum field. And sometimes I teach people, or reveal, I guess you would say, or help people remember that it's similar to plugging in a lamp, right? When we just actually feel love, just the act of feeling love, which is why gratitude is such a potent, conscious, creative tool. Notice miracles start happening when we start going into gratitude. And the reason is because we feel it in our heart. We shift our awareness back into our heart, it expands. And when it begins to expand, the quantum field that we're connected to all the time, becomes immediately accessible to us. And that's the key. When we think about it as plugging in the lamp, those acts of feeling, we've been taught not to feel here, especially men. And that feeling is what the universe responds to. And it's so powerful when you do that. So when we're working through our old traumas and we're releasing them so that we can be lighter and we can be more and more expanded and joyful and in with our hearts fully open, more because we're not afraid to close them because of our past traumas, then miraculous things really start occurring.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
Do the angels have any particular message that they want to share today?
Well, we are in a space of time where I guess I can say fasten your seatbelts. We're about to see some miraculous things because the people that are going to listen, and they've stayed with us up until this point, whether they realize it or not, they're in our little conscious cuckoo club. And they, us, are all actually accumulating and gathering right now. And all we're doing is amplifying a frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And as we amplify the frequency, we're going to find ourselves creating solutions for the challenges that we have personally, be those financial or finding our path and purpose, finding meaning, circumventing depression and other means, and finding a real connection to our source.
Mm-hmm.
And the world itself is collectively going to be creating some amazing solutions from that. And in the next couple of years, you're not going to recognize this place. You're going to see the divine's handiwork working through us. And it's going to be beautiful.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe any of the projects that you're just starting to work on or that you've envisioned that you... I think they're so interesting. And so I think also just people will want to know about them. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. And it's interesting because I wonder sometimes how they're connected.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, okay, just keep going with it. So I did design a deck of angel tarot cards.
Yeah.
So I do teach a tarot class online, and it is an angel tarot class that is technically for using the tarot to connect to the quantum field. And it's very light, but it's also a conscious development class. So people who have taken my class for years and years have described my class as something way more than just teaching the meaning of the cards and how to do readings.
Okay.
It's a conscious development tool. So with the angels, and there's a whole set of miracles that came into creating this deck, including the collaborator that I worked with, the artist, who also is an angel channel as well. And we met through a film and networking group, which is where the angels asked me to go to find this person, which defied logic, but I did it anyway, and it came together. So these cards have an activation in them just because they were channeled by the angels. I also teach right now. I am facilitating or conducting the inner realization, whatever you want to use. I'm trying to refrain from using the word teaching, but I facilitate these small group coaching classes to increase the connectivity with the angels. I do readings and I do hypnotherapy. I put them all together and do activations for people, whether it's a reading or a hypnotherapy session or energy healing session. I always know which one of those tools to use when I'm doing the activations. But I do one-on-one sessions. And with the small group course, and I'm developing some other courses as well, it's all about activating consciousness and creating that connectivity. So it's fun. And this beta project of this class that I got guided to design, the class came together. Their only curiosity was to learn to connect and be guided by the angels more. And since they guide pretty much everything in my life, I thought I feel qualified to teach this. And I also understand the entrainment value of just spending time with them. It changes their energy so that it actually puts them into the inner revelation. Well, by the end of the first week, all of the participants started noticing these miraculous things that were happening to them. And I had to realize, oh my gosh, this isn't just about connecting with them. This is connecting people to the field and activating them. And of course, the miracles and all this flow that comes from being in the flow started happening. And so I realized it's actually a bit of a miracle masterclass, group training or whatever. I'm very passionate about creating content as a filmmaker. I have a film project that is a pet project, and I'm getting that up and running. Well, actually, I'm reminded right now, many films that's about illuminating this realm for those that have entered into it, as well as facilitating other, what I call conscious luminaries, other people who understand that their path is here to show the way to others, to help them create their content and help amplify their message as well. So it keeps changing and evolving. And I'm also getting ready to create a community. And I don't even know what that looks like yet.
Yeah.
But if the listener is interested in being a part of that, stay connected, because that will be revealed in time. But it was one of the things that I realized that's so important is, there's a big difference between constantly being in conversations where the chronic complaining happens and being in expansive connectivity with your world and others. And it's such an activating quality to continue to be in that. So the community is about facilitating that centered home space of bringing people back into the quantum.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how, but I know that I'm meant to create a community, and the community is meant to bring the highest levels of vibration to each other and amplify that frequency, so those that are part of the community benefit from staying in alignment is the ultimate goal of it.
It makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to people a lot about kind of filtering out things that take away their energy, drain their energy, because my life gets more magical and more flow the more I have focused on what feels good and who I have around me. So it makes total sense. So people can go to your website, talktomyangels.com, to sign up for any. I'll tell you guys, if you're watching and listening, I get Seph's emails where he sends out notifications about events that are coming up that I've been to, but also the messages that you pass along. It just so happened a week and a half ago, I was in Syracuse, New York, visiting my friend Kristen, who you met at the retreat.
Love her.
And we were talking about scarcity, and your email came through that day about talking about scarcity of money, and it was just so on point. So I have to tell you guys, if you're listening, you should sign up for his emails, because it's just amazing the things that happen at a certain time like that.
Yeah, no, and I love that too, because it doesn't happen with any regularity. I originally tried, and that's how the quantum field works. You cannot.
It's not like every Tuesday you're sending out.
No, I tried that, and then all of a sudden it wasn't always there.
Yes.
And then I'll just get inspired. The angels say, people need to hear this, and I'll send it out. And it's with no frequency whatsoever. So my email communication list is just a way of keeping people connected to me. And I'm very conservative with the way that I interact with people through that, inviting people into opportunities where I'm facilitating something or whatever. But I also, the podcast that I have, that I'm creating as well, I'm pivoting my own podcast to be purely channeled information.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's and then you and I talked about a project. So
yes.
Yeah, and that's a really cool one. That. Yeah, that came to me in a dream.
Yeah.
And so this sort of creating this content is a window. I feel so compelled to amplify expanded consciousness, quantum consciousness, in every way that I can, whether it's one-on-one or in small groups or in live, like we're going to do in a little bit. And those are actually expanding. I opened up that just keeps bringing me to these other places. Or whether, someone wants to learn tarot with me, I have a recorded course that is accompanied with live action on Zoom or that sort of thing. There's so many different ways that you can get invited into participate. But everything that we do, whether it's the time we spend taking this in, or even with all of the various conscious leaders out there, when we support their work, we're investing in ourselves, right? So if they want to coach with you or something like that, you're investing in yourself, and it comes back. So it's the time and all of that. So it's a very interesting invitation to invest in yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I have a feeling this is not going to be the only time that you're on this podcast.
Right.
So thank you for giving us all just a little taste of what you do and what you're all about. I always end each episode with, what's your current I love it when for the world right now? So I know I didn't prep you for that at all, but what would you say it is?
I love it when I see others just randomly doing something that is selfless and heartful for others.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I love it when that happens.
Thank you. All right, everybody, make sure you go check out his website, talktomyangels.com, and I'll make sure to put all of his information in the details of the podcast. But thank you for listening, and thank you, Seph, for joining me.
Thank you.
Awesome.